Doc, I've had a cough for 2 whole days. Shouldn't we just do an x-ray? Sound familiar? Or how about, I twisted my ankle. Surely that means an x-ray is mandatory, right? Well, what if I told you that getting an x-ray might actually do more harm than good? Welcome back. I'm Dr. Dynamo, your friendly neighborhood urgent care doc. Today, we're smashing a common medical myth that x-rays are somehow therapeutic and you need them for every ache and sniffle. Spoiler alert, you don't.
Hey guys, really quick before we jump into the video, I just want to say that, believe it or not, more than 90% of you guys watching this video right now aren't subscribed. I want to continue bringing you guys high quality content here on the channel. And to do that, we need your support. I'm not sponsored by any big industry names, and everything we do here on this channel is supported by you guys. So if you subscribe now, my commitment to you is that me and my team will continue doing everything in our power to bring you guys the highest quality content. Thanks for listening. Let's get into it.
As physicians, we're trained to think critically. Our job isn't to hand out x-rays like candy. It's to decide carefully if imaging actually changes our treatment plan. And here's a secret. Most docs wish their patients knew. Listening to your story and performing a thorough physical exam usually gives us all the information we need. Take a cough, for instance. Most coughs, even nasty sounding ones, don't require an x-ray. Your history and physical exam typically tell us whether it's a simple viral infection, bronchitis, or something more serious. According to the American College of Radiology's appropriateness criteria for acute respiratory illness in immunocompetent patients, chest radiography is typically reserved for situations where the clinical evaluation suggests a more serious underlying condition. Specifically, a chest x-ray is usually appropriate when there is suspicion of pneumonia, the patient exhibits worsening dyspnea accompanied by leukocytosis, chest pain, or edema, there's a history of coronary artery disease or congestive heart failure. In the absence of these indicators, routine chest radiography for a cough, especially of short duration, 2-3 days, is generally not warranted. Now, let's talk about that ankle sprain. One of the most common injuries I see in urgent care. And usually, the first thing people say is, "Don't you think I need an x-ray?" But here's the thing, we don't rely on guesswork. We use science in medicine. Specifically, we use something called the Ottawa Ankle and Foot Rules. The Ottawa Ankle Rules were developed in the early 1990s by a group of emergency physicians in Ottawa, Canada. Shout out to my Canadian brothers and sisters out there. Their goal? Reduce unnecessary x-rays in emergency departments without missing true fractures. They studied hundreds of patients with ankle injuries and followed them over time to identify which signs were the most predictive of a real bone break. The result was a simple decision-making tool that has stood the test of time. In fact, it's so effective, it's now used around the world. To order an x-ray of the ankle, at least one of these must be true. The patient has pain in the malleolar zone, the bony parts around the ankle, and bony tenderness at the posterior edge or tip of the lateral malleolus, or bone tenderness at the posterior edge or tip of the medial malleolus, or the patient is unable to bear weight both immediately and in the emergency department, i.e. they can't take 4 steps without extreme pain. Now, to order an x-ray of the foot, the Ottawa Ankle and Foot Rules suggest that the patient has pain in the midfoot zone and bone tenderness at the base of the 5th metatarsal, or bone tenderness at the navicular bone, or inability to weight bear both immediately after the injury and in the clinic. Now, these rules are over 95% sensitive, meaning they almost never miss a real fracture, and they've been validated in multiple studies and settings over time. So when I examine your ankle and decide you don't need an x-ray, it's not because I'm being lazy. It's because the science tells me you're probably going to be just fine without one. So next time you roll your ankle, remember, it's not about whether it hurts. It's about where and how. That's what guides our decision. And that's how we keep you safe, smart, and radiation-free unless you really need it. But doc, what's the big deal about an x-ray anyway? Well, each x-ray exposes you to radiation. Small doses these days, yes, but it can add up over time. Repeated unnecessary imaging can increase your lifetime risk of developing cancer. That's why we adhere to the ALARA principle, as low as reasonably achievable, when deciding whether to order imaging. Now, to put things into perspective, here's how much radiation you're exposed to during common imaging procedures. Now, dental x-rays give about 0.005 millisieverts. That's about the same as a day's worth of natural background radiation, meaning the radiation you get just by walking around in your life. Chest x-rays give about 0.1 millisieverts, which is equivalent to 10 days of natural background radiation. And a chest CT, well, that gives over 7 millisieverts of radiation. That's about 2 years worth of natural background radiation levels. And an abdomen or pelvic CT scan, well, now we're talking over 10 millisieverts, 3 years or more of natural background radiation equivalent. Now, did you know that in the early 20th century, x-rays were so popular, they were even used in shoe stores to ensure a proper fit? From the 1920s through the 1950s, thousands of shoe stores in North America and Europe featured devices called shoe-fitting fluoroscopes. Customers would place their feet into these machines to view x-ray images of their feet inside shoes, aiming for that perfect fit. However, these machines emitted significant amounts of radiation. A typical 20-second exposure could deliver about 0.13 sieverts to the feet. Now, this is a dose far exceeding today's safety standards. Prolonged and repeated exposure led to serious health issues. Now, there are documented cases of store clerks and customers from that time period developing radiation burns, dermatitis, and even cancers linked to those devices. And if you think the risks of radiation are exaggerated, here's a powerful historical reminder. One of the earliest documented cases of X-ray related harm involved a gentleman by the name of Clarence Daly. Now, you might not be familiar with his name, but you probably know his boss. See, he was a technician in the laboratory of Mr. Thomas Edison. Daly worked extensively with X-ray fluoroscopes in the late 1800s, often exposing himself to radiation for hours at a time. And over time, he developed painful lesions on his hands. His hair fell out. His skin aged rapidly. In 1902, doctors amputated his left arm, and the next year, his right arm. He eventually died of metastatic skin cancer at just 39 years old. The incident was so severe that even Thomas Edison, the great inventor himself, halted all X-ray research and famously said, "Don't talk to me about X-rays. I'm afraid of them." Now, this historical example underscores the importance of using medical imaging judiciously. While X-rays are invaluable diagnostic tools, unnecessary exposure carries real risks. That's why we carefully assess whether an imaging test will genuinely impact your diagnosis or treatment plan. So, the next time you're advised that an X-ray isn't necessary, remember, it's not about cutting corners. It's about protecting your long-term health. So, why the myth that X-rays are therapeutic? Well, I think a lot of it comes down to psychology. For some patients, getting an X-ray feels like proof their pain is real, or that their visit to the clinic or hospital was worth it. It's a form of reassurance, but reassurance shouldn't come with radiation, especially when it won't change your diagnosis or your treatment plan. Now, to be fair, X-rays today are much safer than they were in the past. I mentioned before that the levels people were exposed to in those old shoe stores were more than 10, even 100 times greater than common radiation exposure levels with modern X-ray equipment. The reality is we've made incredible technological advancements over time. Digital imaging, lower radiation doses, and strict protocols mean the average patient receives far less exposure now than they did 50 years ago. And we don't just blast and hope. We use lead shields. We calculate dose limits. We train staff to minimize exposure. All of this falls under the principle of ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. But here's the key. Safer doesn't mean harmless. Even with reduced exposure, radiation is cumulative over your entire lifetime. That means every unnecessary X-ray adds to the total dose your body receives. That's why doctors aren't stingy with imaging. We're strategic. We only order when it helps us make a better decision for your care. It's not about cutting costs or skipping steps. It's about protecting you from risks you can't see. So the next time you visit your doctor or urgent care, remember, trust their judgment. If they say you don't need an X-ray, it's because they've listened, they've examined carefully, and thoughtfully decided it won't improve your care. Your health and safety are always our top priority. Help me spread this important message. Please, I'm begging you. And hit that subscribe button to share the video. Until next time, guys, stay dynamic. Peace.